Live. That's it. Premiere. We're on the web now. And it's amazing. Hey, great. Whoever is joining now or might have watched this conversation later. Bjarte just arrived. That's amazing. Cool. So we might drop him a short note on our chat. So this is a full premiere. We've got a new channel here, a new channel for great conversations on probably what we've been talking a lot already during the past years, agility for whole organizations. And now, given the current situation, what we learned in 2020, there's probably a lot to add to this. And yeah, it's great having all of you here on the call. So this is not the complete team. Ivana is not yet with us. And probably there is many more who help out now to make this happen. And we've got Bjarte, who's going to join us in a few minutes. And yeah, probably we'll just bring him in, right, to start the conversation. For those who don't know him, Bjarte Bogsnes is probably one of the inventors of the Beyond Budgeting method or framework, what do you call it? And Beyond Budgeting, as it says already, is obviously something to make finance more adaptable. Here's Bjarte. Hello. Live from Norwegian capital, probably, right? Bjarte, you unmuted. You need to unmute. Now we can hear you.
Good.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm
Where
good.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm in Norway. I'm in my summer cabin. So
all right.
Let's hope that the Wi-Fi connection is good enough. But
yeah, it works. We can see you. We can hear you.
Okay,
so meet the team here. It's just again parts of the team. Some colleagues are helping out behind the scenes. And this is new. This is a premiere. We are basically starting this channel because we recognized, and that's the intro now, the Business Agility Conference in New York was interesting in March. It was right at the spot when, afterwards most countries shut down their borders and traveling got restricted. That was, I think, March 13 when I came back, and the dates are probably too after this weekend. And then Business Agility Conference Vienna, which was scheduled for May, we had to stop. And now we're right in the middle of the storm, or maybe, we don't know, are we already out of it? Or however, I think agility has become a different thing. And Bjarte, you've been joining us last year on the conference in Vienna with an amazing talk around business, beyond budgeting. And it would be interesting to hear, first of all, a little bit from your side, what's different now? 2020. It's probably a few interesting views here, right?
Well, first of all, I mean, in case you don't know, you mentioned beyond budgeting, and the purpose of beyond budgeting is not necessarily to get rid of budgets. The purpose is to create these organizations that are more adaptive, more flexible, and more human. Call it more agile. So just let's position it as that first. And well, what's different? Some things are, and some are not. Well, of course, I mean the VUCA expression that some of us are getting tired of is more relevant than ever as such, because it is that's definitely what we are facing out there. Is that new? I don't think so. I mean, we had a big bang with the financial crisis some years ago, and I think we had a constant lower level of VUCA all the way in between here. So VUCA is with her all the time. It's just that now it's more kind of profound and more aggressive, to put it that way. So that has changed, that there is a peak in the VUCA right now. But what hasn't changed is the other reason for going beyond budgeting, which is not about our business environment. It is about our people. And the fact that we have great people on board that want to do a good job, want to be involved, want to be listened to, want to be treated as adults. And that has not changed, not at all. So I think it's important in these days that we don't lose that justification for business agility. so that we don't become too focused on what's happening right now. Because the danger of that is that when this will pass, as it will one day, some managers might think that, well, whoa, that was that. Now we can go back to the old way of managing, and the future is now plannable and predictable, and traditional management will work. So let's not kind of be, let's not forget that there are two sides to this: the world out there and people in the organization.
Bjarte,
yes?
I'm also very interested to hear from you. What major patterns of businesses reacting to the current pandemic you observe?
Well, what I do observe is that companies that have gone beyond budgeting are now extremely happy that have done so. We have in the beyond budgeting movement, we have several kind of business networks, and we are part of an energy network, and we had a meeting yesterday, and all those companies participating were extremely happy that they did not operate with traditional detailed annual budgets. For us at Equinor, this is nothing new, because we've been doing this for 15 years. So even last time we had a big crisis, the financial crisis, we had exactly the same experience, that we can be much more flexible, much faster than competition in doing things that we need to do. We don't need to kind of call back a lot of pre-allocated resources, because we haven't pre-allocated. So the less you pre-allocate, the less need for reallocating. So again, I think it is a stark reminder, and a great reminder, by all means, that this stuff makes sense and is good for business. But again, not just because it's turbulent out there right now. It is also that more longer sustainable thing about people in the organization.
Bjarte, in terms of kind of management and the reaction in companies to this crisis, you've talked about kind of people and the focus on our people. Do you think companies are responding more in a people-focused way, or a crisis management command and control sort of way? What do you see out there?
That's a good question, and I think we are seeing both. And unfortunately, in traditional companies, I think we are seeing too much of what we shouldn't see. But again, we do see the opposite. A great example from our company. Our CEO was out just a few days ago and talked about the need for doing a lot of even radical things now when it comes to activity levels and so on. But he asked everybody, all his business leaders, to put on the corporate hat, the Equinor hat, and say that, I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You know better than me what's the right thing to do here. When you do that, keep your Equinor hat on and not your business unit hat. So I think it was very nice to see him reinforcing a key message in Beyond Budgeting about around autonomy and empowerment. But unfortunately, I mean, this is the exception, but my hope is that, I mean, again, that this leads to even more organizations realizing that the old mindset of prediction and command and control, that it's, or especially the prediction part, that it doesn't work anymore.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and just related to this issue with the mindset and people focus, have you seen any shifts in the conversations you've had with organizations, and particularly after this whole thing became a pandemic and we're all in lockdown?
Well, it has given, again, a peak in the beyond budgeting interest, definitely. It's I've been in touch with a UK company called David Lloyd's. It's a high-end sports club chain in the UK. I think they also have some business in Europe. 150 clubs, and this company, it's quite an amazing story, by the way, because the first time I heard about Beyond Budgeting was October 14 last year. January 1, they started out, and already now they are seeing the benefits of that they hadn't kind of locked in next year into an annual detailed budget. Before I continue, here you are back again. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I mean that's just one of many examples of companies that I'm talking to. And you know, I actually also think that this will be a wake-up call for all the organizations which are on these grand agile transformation journeys, but not yet have realized that they also need to address the stuff that we address in Beyond Budgeting. Because I'm convinced that, I mean, and this is quite sad, I mean, you might see maybe some aborted agile transformation journeys because they are not able to cope with, or they haven't dealt with the issues that we are talking about in Beyond Budgeting. But if this could be a wake-up call that they also need to address this, I mean, that would be nice.
And Bjarte, do you feel a lot of companies will roll back on their transformations because of this? In fact, it will have the opposite effect.
Well, that's my fear, that it could happen in some organizations. Yeah. But again, I mean, I hope we also see equally much of the opposite, that they realize that, I mean, the reason it doesn't work as it should in times like this is because they haven't addressed call it the Beyond Budgeting part of this. Because this is back to something I've said many times, and no organization will achieve or succeed on an agile transformation journey unless you also address what Beyond Budgeting is addressing. And many organizations discover this quite late. And I don't think it's a secret that ING is one of those examples. You know, it's heralded as a great agile transformation journey, but they discovered this quite late. But we were called in, and hopefully it had some impact. So let's see. I think there will be a lot of learning coming out of this when, yeah.
One more question.
By the way, just one reflection on agile transformation. I'm very sensitive to words. I actually struggle a bit with that word also, because, okay, transformation, what comes afterwards? Are you done? So, okay.
Indeed, transformation never ends. The question, there are different conversations in the communities nowadays about the call for different type of leadership, especially in crisis. Probably you heard about the different types of CEOs, peacetime CEO and wartime CEO, and that they thrive under different conditions. So what do you think about these created polarities nowadays around the crisis pandemic is calling for different type of leadership, and how the new normal, next new normal would look like?
Yeah, since you used this military metaphor, I think it's quite interesting that, by the way, I actually have maybe you don't know, I have a military background myself. My initial career plan, and I'm a bit ashamed, was to go for a military career. So I spent 2 years in the Norwegian Army, and then I realized this was not my thing. I got an overdose of command and control, so I went for business studies instead. But anyway, I mean, on that metaphor, it's I think even the military realized that even if command and control might work in peacetime, it doesn't work in wartime. Because in wartime, then you actually you can't sit there in that safe headquarter and plan everything on the battlefield. You have to. You can be clear on ambitions and goals and directions, but then you have to let go. So and maybe that applies to businesses at war with the coronavirus as well. That these are times when the old stuff is even more unsuitable.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Let's see.
There's an interesting question on Facebook, which we can bring in here. It's probably pointing towards, mindset, like how would you, get CFOs to not pre-allocate budgets? That's probably not relevant to the actual crisis, but probably a lot about currently what we see and what is needed is about mindset. So yeah, that's a question. Talking with CFOs now who have a lot of responsibility, the board having a lot of responsibility, what would they go for, and where would you start?
Well, I've had many discussions with CFOs on this topic, and sometimes I use their private economy as a reference here, because you're going to buy this new yacht, and for once you need to borrow money in the bank, and we are in February, and let's assume that you go to your bank and say that you want to borrow money, and the response from the bank is that, sorry, we are only open in October. Right? Unfortunately for this guy, of course, or for these guys, I mean, that would not happen because banks are open all year long. But I don't think they realize that they are kind of practicing concepts that are so far away from how they will manage their private economy, or how they would like the private economy to work. So again, a key concept in Beyond Budgeting: the bank should always be open. Yes or no depends on how good is the stuff you ask money for, and can we afford it as things looks today. I mean, it's just like we manage our private economy in general. I mean, we don't plan for our car to break down in April. And I mean, when stuff happens and we respond, we're actually much more agile. Even CFOs are much more agile in their private life than in business life, which I find a bit fascinating. But again, back to the issue of, as I said earlier, the more you pre-allocate, the more you have to reallocate when stuff happens. And that's hard because budget money is seen as kind of, it's my money, you gave it to me, and I don't want to give it back. And then you get all the haggling and all the, so again, the key concept of in Beyond Budgeting, continuous delivery, not of software functionality, but of decisions and financial resources.
Yeah. So interesting enough, I mean, this sounds quite easy for smaller organizations, right? We all run smaller organizations around, I don't know, 50 people max probably. But, having listened to the CEO of VW these days, and he was on television probably each week in Germany, he was really saying, our cost currently is 2 billion euros per week, 2 billion euros, and we have actually zero revenue. But that sounds quite interesting, because now getting to reallocation and really starting this game, how would you go for that? I mean, now we talk a little bit about a real agile business. The board is getting together. Okay, we don't have all the information. How do we get all these managers together to switch gears or change direction? Mm-hmm. And we don't need to attach to those big numbers now, but just to say, yeah, what could the operational approach look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me first say that, I mean, small companies, they are born beyond budgeting, right? They become something else as they grow, because they are told that what you have isn't good enough and you need this and that and so on. And then you end up in the same misery if you become a big company. But when it comes to the specific situation you are talking about, which a lot of companies face, about needing massive reduction in activity levels, for me that is a slightly different discussion. First of all, it is the discussion about, I mean, how can we kind of do we need to be that radical? I mean, can we kind of weather this in some form or shape? If you can't, and I accept, I mean, I accept that some companies are in extreme trouble and they need to do something radical. I think the way this is done is extremely important. And back to how our CEO responded, right? His message was that, yes, we need to do something, and you know better than me what the best thing to do is. So I think that's in a way the business agility dimension of this discussion is how these reductions are done, not if they are done or not.
So we are seeing, this is Manoj, So this is we're seeing a lot of IT companies or companies in general also are reducing their spending budget in technology, right? So over like 40% of the CIOs and the IT execs basically expect their budget to decline, and about budgets around technology will reduce to about 4%, right, for the year 2020. Now, if we're looking at that and taking the example from previously about what you were talking about, the CFOs, but for larger companies, what is the trend that we are seeing? That what is the lesson to be learned here? Like, this situation with COVID, it's not going to change. It's going to change things forever. But at the same time, what is that the learning that companies can take, especially around technology and their spending, of looking at from an overall and an overhaul of the transformation pieces that companies are looking at right now?
Well, maybe all those savings in trust can be spent to make sure that you keep investing on the IT side. But I don't have a really good answer on that. I mean, I talk to less kind of CEOs than CFOs and CEOs. So you guys might have a better answer on that than I do. Sorry.
That's all right.
So in terms of kind of spending, most organizations, their costs are kind of fixed for premises, for staff, etc. Some governments have allowed them some leeway with that by allowing them to lay off staff temporarily, pay those staff by government, and then come back. But a lot of companies are still stuck with those fixed day costs. How can they move away from that kind of fixed budgeting mindset, annual mindset, or do they need to keep a part of that as well as they move forward with beyond budgeting?
Well, I mean, being or having a high portion of fixed cost in a business is not that is not a beyond budgeting issue as such. It's more a strategy issue. I mean, do you want to outsource and get make fixed cost variable and all that? So those are kind of bigger strategic discussions where I think it's easy to fail. But there is no. Yeah, maybe some will kind of try to make more of the cost base variable and not fixed, with all the with the negative consequences that might have. I mean, if this was a blindingly obvious decision what to do, I mean, everybody would have done it. So, and of course, we are facing the same situation in our organization. I mean, there's a lot of costs that are fixed, and you can't do anything immediately short term. So it's just like again in our private economy. So maybe it's when we are wondering on behalf of organizations, maybe we should take a look at our own finances and what would we have done if this was
Yeah.
So
I mean, the current situation is obviously a very complex one. It's not only about business, it's really about the whole economy, and the whole business systems are put on the spot and probably need to be redesigned, re-engineered, and hopefully come back to life again. So that's one thing. But interesting enough, the other one would be really the learning. That's what we already said. Business agility is obviously, it used to be for some already a new buzzword over the past 2 years. But now it's obviously something we can attach to. And you mentioned it before, transformation. Now, coming back to the offices, God knows when. In Austria, I think we start probably next month. We can't just say, hey, let's continue with our transformation, right? There is an opportunity. And the question is, how will this opportunity look like? What can we do? What should we do? How can we now really transform and say, hey, let's sit together and learn forward, learn backwards. So I'm not sure what you see. And what do you expect when you come back to your offices or your clients whom you work on beyond budgeting initiatives with?
Again, I think it can go both ways, and I think we'll see both ways. I think this can accelerate transformation journeys, but it can also set them back because the focus will be kind of so much on continued mitigation and range of control mechanism to kind of keep the virus away and so on. That it's, yeah, I think it's very hard to say. I have definitely a hope, but I also have a concern.
Yeah. We talk a lot about anti-fragile nowadays. Nassim Taleb's words, I think, become, we didn't want this, but it's now more apparent what this means. And it's very easy to say nowadays. But again, pointing to VW, saying you've got 650,000 employees mainly in car production, that sounds already anti-fragile because, because, there's more to come. There could be the climate crisis. There could be disruption on the market, right? And yeah, so here's another question.
Yeah,
that's quite interesting.
Again,
sorry.
On that one, I mean, look at this from the employees' view. I mean, would they all like to be gig workers on short-term contracts for this company? So, yeah, it's
yeah. So the question obviously is again talking money, where to invest. Like saying having more balance in your portfolio. Like saying, hey, maybe we need to invest more into services, maybe into new technologies, maybe to consider some of the technologies will just, pass away, and some of the people will not work there anymore. Just think about gearboxes, right? It's the funny thing. Nobody who works in gearboxes today has the understanding this will be the job I'll do until the rest of my life, because electric cars don't need that anymore. So that's already quite challenging. But anyway, here's another question, and coming to an end. Actually, I'm pointing actually to your real work. Maybe you've got a few champions, and I think you have. Not looking to the future, but to the present, who made it already, who are the champions in beyond budgeting, and who are really taking a lead here. Maybe also an example.
No, the list is long. A lot of companies, big and small, have gone beyond budgeting. Some started out many years ago, some years ago, and some are starting out in these days. And I could share a range of great case stories. And I think I mentioned this in Vienna. And, if you start with a smaller company that has been beyond budgeting from day one, there's a Norwegian IT company called Miles. They have business in Norway, the Baltics, India, and South Africa. Miles have no budgets, no targets, just a lot of great performance. If you work for, they are growing fast, but growth was never a target. It's a consequence of doing well. And if you work for Miles, you can buy whatever you want, replace it as often as you want. It can be as expensive as you want. You can attend, there's no PC budgets. You can attend whatever training or seminar or conference you want as often as you want, wherever in the world. No travel budgets, no training budgets. And that sounds like a paradise, but I mean, it's not an anarchy. They have a very simple control mechanism. Again, which is a recommendation from beyond budgeting. When you have bought that PC, when you have returned from that training, you need to post on the intranet what you did and the cost of it. So transparency is their only cost control mechanism, which they are very happy with. Their only small concern is, could it be too effective? Right? Are people buying good enough PCs? Are they taking enough training? So that's a wonderful company. It's an example of a company that has been able to grow without ending up in the same misery, because they have been conscious about it from day one. Fascinating story, by the way, because the guy who started this company, he originally wanted to become a nurse, but then he realized he couldn't stand blood, so he became an engineer instead, and worked for many years in large companies before he got so fed up that he said, I'm going to start my own based on very different principles. So a great beyond budgeting example. And you have probably heard about the company that we often talk about, and maybe too much, but we have a pioneer, a Swedish bank with 250 branches in different parts of Europe that started out actually in 1970. It's called Handelsbanken. And again, no budgets, no targets, and no individual bonus. And again, I just saw some numbers released on profitability from this bank, and it didn't look too bad, even if in these times. So so these are just two examples, but we have them across businesses, more still in private sector than the public sector, but it is starting also in the public sector slowly. More in Europe than in the US, unfortunately, but we have some great cases in the US as well. Some in Asia. You have in China. You probably heard about Haier. That's an amazing case. Even if I don't agree with all elements of the model, it is a fascinating case.
Great. Bjarte, so let's say I am someone that's coming from an organization, and I'm seeing that there can be a better way of moving forward with this. Where would you point someone to maybe make a start on this journey? And also, if how maybe the people can keep in touch with you.
Well, I mean, start with checking up our website, bbrt.org. Maybe continue with joining one of our meetings. Normally in London, sometimes we go other places. It's a great opportunity to meet people, hear other cases. And then, and on those meetings, there will be people that you could talk to take potential further steps. So that's a typical pattern that we've seen, that people come on. They check out the website. They might contact one of us. They come to our meetings, and then things get started. But again, we have seen other examples, like again these companies on agile transformation journeys who realize that there is a missing piece, and they contact us based on that. And so we've seen a lot of companies taking contact after they've heard us speak at conferences and so on. So yeah.
Cool. And what would be the best way if people want to get in touch with you? What would be the best way to get in touch?
Good old email still works. I'm of course I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter and all that stuff, and so I think it's not a lack of contact channels we are missing.
Yeah, I think we put your bio from the BBRT website below the stream here on YouTube, so that could be a pointer. Okay. And it would be great if you could gain some more insights, what's happening these days, weeks, and upcoming months, and maybe chat again in a few weeks or so when we see new insights and maybe a major disruption in the space. That would be really interesting. And for now, it was really great having you, because looking at the time, you mentioned you've got another meeting in about 10 minutes, and so. Not being in the office doesn't mean not being busy. It was really a pleasure having you, and it's really a pleasure having you in this community of we call it change makers, just people who are blunt about breaking with status quo and moving forward where it makes sense to do so.
Wonderful, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bjarte.
Stay in touch, and
thank you, Bjarte.
And basically stay healthy. That's probably the most important thing these days to mention.
Stay indoors.
Very good. Good to see you all.
Good to see you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you, Bjarte. Yes, bye-bye. All right. That was interesting. Interesting impulse. Couple of thoughts.
I think one of the thoughts I had from that was the references Bjarte made back to people all the time. And how would those kind of workers in the factory feel, knowing that their jobs are in jeopardy, that the company is still spending money on premises and production lines, etc., and how engaged are they going to be afterwards? So when this thing is over and decisions have been made without people, how are those people going to feel as employees in a company? Will they be engaged, and are their transformations going to continue with the same vigor and kind of responsiveness that they used to?
Yeah, especially if the message that they want to get across is that we want to empower the people to make the decisions and all that, and then all of a sudden it's done a complete 180, and a lot of very difficult decisions have been made that affect them. And
it's also changing the mindset of people who are working within the organization, right? I mean, it requires a lot of mindset change from coaching the teams and understanding how they can go from the comfort zone to the stretch zone as we are all moving from one situation to the other situation, right? And how that brings different challenges.
What levels of the organization, Eminoy, are you talking about? Because if you talk about the teams, they're the ones affected by some of the decisions that are made in this crisis time. We can coach them, but if...
Yeah, the management, right? We're talking about the senior managers, management, executives, which are actually have something to do with the budgets as well as something to do with the working of that, moving from the comfort to the stretch zone, like how to support their employees and get the daily business going and get the company moving.
Yeah, I think Nadezhda, you brought up about the kind of peacetime, wartime CEOs. And I think with these kind of crises, there's a lot of emotion.
Absolutely.
And people feel they need to fix the problem, to help the organization. And they tend to take control and then start telling people what to do.
Honestly, from my experience working with executives and founders and managing directors, there are special traits of character, set of attitudes and beliefs that got them where they are now, that required lots of bold decision making, taking risks. It's a big risk founding a company and getting more people employed, or taking the risks of launching a new product, inventing something. So these set of attitudes got them where they are now, and embarking on agile transformation journey, which is at its core is people, human-centric, and requires shift in the attitudes and letting go of control and decentralizing decision-making, right? It's a bit of a different attitude that these leaders typically need to gain. And this time, the crisis, where so much uncertainty, is a naturally reactive tendency of fixing to get things done. So yes, this is a pendulum getting back and forth, but I really like that Bjarte also mentioned that it doesn't have to be this way. So you actually can, this is a coaching opportunity for us as management consultants also to make our clients aware that they do not have to detract to their previous patterns of just pushing through, but also engage and include their people around them to find creative solutions. So that's a great opportunity of stretching this muscle of inclusivity in decision making, and I find it wonderful. Yet, of course, you probably hear this phrase in different sources: "Never miss a good crisis," right? So, which I try to as well, to see that yes, you're right. There are lots of emotions, of course, showing up and emerging. And honestly, from what I observe, there is a certain part of our mental capacity preoccupied on a daily basis on top of us being under pressure, making decisions on a very short basis, a short time notice in the face of great uncertainty. Still, part of our mental capacity is preoccupied with emotions, anxiety, worrying about our families and friends, and overall how it's going to have long-lasting cascading effect on economy and other ecosystems. So it's complex, but also I think if we come together, the next new normal will be very different.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Because I mean, I was while you were discussing, I was always thinking about culture, and probably we find a couple of different cultures out there which are more in the one or the other direction, supporting more deeper thoughts, or just saying short-term reaction, and that's probably it. You could really draw it up on a scale, saying here's the bold guys who are now moving forward and saying that's the opportunity. Then there are the others who are more fence sitters, saying, I don't know, we are challenged by finance, because talking finance, this is a lot of responsibility here. When would you basically call your company being bankrupt? Every CEO needs to be very careful nowadays. And then there might be even the stakeholders, if you're in a bigger company, who are still maybe asking for their shares, for their ROI. And so there might be also some who are just saying, oh shit, we now need to take all breaks and need to move through more tough waters.
What if the
Yeah, I mean, it's the recent.
What if the bold leaders were actually the ones that went to their teams and said, "Hey guys, what are we going to do?"
Yeah.
Well, the most recent thought on Beyond, I mean, this is what my understanding was, like reading through and also going through previous discussions, is around how Beyond Budgeting in the new context is talking about setting up a new management control system, as well as unbundling of the entire budgeting systems that they have, right? Which leads to like whatever you have in a budgeting system, like forecasting, targets, allocation of different resources and people, and how you can bring that transparency into the process, so that there's a positive change within the organization, and also changes the mindset and hopefully shifts the mindset of the people and behavior of people who are in a decision-making position.
Right.
What I would be interested in, as I noticed in some other communities, would be great to note down somewhere our assumptions around how the situation is going to unfold in the next few months, and then check in the next 2 months to see what kind of our predictions and assumptions came true. That was I was thinking about.
And that's a very really interesting point. I'm currently actually proposing this to our customers to say, make your notes now, which you can refer to back later. But understanding what Dave Snowden does these days, I think he's currently on the call asking people for even data, bringing data from the current observations. So they want to make a little bit out of an analysis out of it later on. So there's obviously a few pointers here where people can go to, either doing it on their own, or just reaching out for people. They can reach out to us if they want to know more. I think we're coming close to the hour, and that means close to the end of this show. It was a premiere, it was the first one. So probably still a lot of stuff to be improved, but there is lots of interesting stuff to come, because what we just finished up with was pointing to next sessions and, talking business agility. This is a new norm now, that changes basically happen all the time. Uncertainty is, max, and we still need to drive. And for understanding better what that means and what we can do here, and find also people to discuss with, we're going to have a few interesting guests coming up over the next days, weeks, months, and what else. And I think next show will be next week. Stay tuned on this channel. Maybe subscribe if you're not yet done so, either on YouTube or on Facebook, or visit our website, where we will also announce the next date and have the next guest announced. So thanks to all of you for the interesting conversation. It was a pleasure talking with you. It was a pleasure talking with Bjarte, and have a great day. See you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.